All right, and we are recording. So today, what we're gonna try to cover is actually a couple of things. One is we're going to do a little exploration of some APIs in MUMPS and in VISTA that actually have to do with getting things in and out of Vista, because this is usually a big area where where actually people need to know getting in stuff in and out of mumps. And the other thing we're gonna cover is dollar query. Now I'm going to tell you guys, I've taught the first time I taught dollar query to people, I was not able to teach it. It took me several years to understand it. Seriously. So all I could tell you is, get the get the faint idea of how it works, and I'm not gonna give you any homeworks that utilize it, but I just want you to know it exists and how to use it. But I I don't expect you to really master it unless you actually program in mumps for several years. It took me pretty much that long to understand it. Maybe maybe I could explain it well enough for you to understand it right away, but I do I don't I highly doubt I'll be able to do that. So we're going to start. The very first thing we're going to do today is we're going to cover how to get things in and out of mumps. And this is a step. Basically, this is pretty much the same for cache and GTM by and large. Now, if you guys remember, we might have talked, I believe we talked about this utility. So the first thing we're gonna cover is routine directory. Now, this is do upcard %rd. It's the same on GTM and cache. You do %rd, and it tells you which routines are available on your system. And if I put star here and hit enter, I'm going to have 20,000 plus routines scrolling through. So I don't want to do that. Let's just say I want all the routines that start with XWB, which are the broker routines, and it gives you all the broker routines. I want all the Vista link routines, which are XOBV, and I get all the Vista link routines. And so that's pretty much all you need to know for %rd. That's how it works. It's very simple. It tells you which routines you have on your system. So let's cover the next thing. So the next thing we want to cover is global directory. Now, global directory, like routine directory, is very simple. It's going to tell you what globals are on your system. So, and let's look at all the globals that start with the letter A. And here you go. You get to see that there are 29 globals. And B, 9 globals. So that's all there is to it. There's nothing much more. So we figured out how do we know that something exists, whether something exists, a global or a routine. So the next thing that we're going to cover is how to get globals and routines into the system and out of the system. And this is essentially, basically when you're doing Vista, you usually do these things via kids, but we're not doing it via kids. This is below kids. What does the MUMPS system provide you that will let you do that? So let's get started. For routines, you have percent RO routine output and percent RI routine input. Anybody wants to guess what the corresponding utilities for globals are? Yeah, that's pretty much it. GO and GI. So percent GO is global output. Percent GI, oh, GI global input. Okay, sure. One of you guys has the mic on. Can you make sure that you're muted, please? All right, thank you. So, so I'm gonna give you an example of a routine output. So if you remember, guys, what we did. So let me see. Let that. So let's let if we remember that I have my own routines under Kban and I constructed a lot of them while we're working in the class. So what I want to do now is I want to export them so I could save them in on my home computer, and perhaps I could load them on another system if I want to. So let me do that. So um and guys, for you guys running cache, I just need to tell you this. Whenever we're exporting something, we're writing something on the file system, and usually you are if you did not set up the system, you're not in control of your file system. So you probably will need to ask. You'll need to ask your system administrator of where to save it. If you are on Linux, there's a safe bet that you have a temp directory, and that's what I'm going to use. So cache on Linux and GTM on Linux, like we're running, you always have a TMP directory, and I'm going to show you how to use that. So let's go ahead and export my routines. So do upcard percent routine output. So it's going to ask you what routine, nothing complex here. And it's GTM is going to tell you output device by default is terminal, so you could actually print them to your screen. But I'm going to tell it, I'm going to put it in /temp, which I just referred. Just say sam's routines dot RSA. You typically want to have either an RSA or an RO extension, because that's how that's just sort of a convention in the mumps world, that what the extension for routine extracts are. And then it gives you a label, and this could be any free text. So to be really serious, I'll show you a free text. All right, and we always keep this at no. So here you go. It got extracted. So let's get out. I'm getting out of MUMPS, and I'm going to actually take a look at the file, see if it exists or not. So I'm just going to use a text editor and take a look at the file on my file system, and you could see that it has everything that I actually want exported. So that's good. So let's say I actually want to create a new, let's say I'm going to create a new MUMPS environment and I want those routines in it. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Let's just echo GTM test. All right, I'm just gonna be doing it on the seat of my pants here. I'm not gonna. I'm not sure if this is gonna work. Here we go. It did work. Haha. So guys, I just created my own GTM environment. That's crazy fast, isn't it? Now, this is if you guys know Bhaskar, he's the program manager for GTM. He created those scripts so that you could actually set up your own GTM environment in less than a second. And you could see how I did it essentially. I sourced a file called GTM profile. That's not the focus of this class, that's something else. Just telling you a nice thing that we have with GTM where you could set up a new database in 1 second like that. So let's look at my routines and let's look at all the routines I have. You could see that I don't have my routines here. So now I'm going to do, now I have to, before I load something in, I have to know my configuration and GTM. You have to know something you called your Z routines variable. And you could see where GTM is going to store my routines. So for me, I actually plan to put my routines there, and this is not something you have to do with cache. Only in GTM you have to know which directories your routines will go into. So I'm going to do upcaret% RI. Now RI is routine input. And now it's asking, okay, what device are you gonna, where do you want me to load it from? So I'm gonna scroll back up and just get back my file name that I saved the stuff in. And boy, I don't remember. All right, that's fabulous. I don't remember where I stored it. Let me scroll up manually here. Here you go. That's where it is. Here you go. Now, this is the important prompt that you get only on GTM and not on cache, because GTM saves its routines on the file system. You have to know the output of your $Z routines. Otherwise, you will not be able to save the routines appropriately. Now, GTM unfortunately has a very complex format, especially in this case. But this is the directory I want to save stuff to. And this is really, 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 really important. Do not forget the trailing slash, because there's a long-standing bug which I was promised will be fixed in GTM. This one, you have to put the trailing slash, otherwise GTM does not know that you're importing directories. That does not know that this is a directory. So hit enter, and guess what? I just loaded my routines. Let's confirm it. Yep, guys, remember that? Here you go. So my routines have been imported. Now, here's another thing. So some of you may ask, okay, fantastic, great. I got the routines out of the VISTA database, but how am I going to get them to my machine so I could email them to somebody else? Well, this is where you use a program like, if you're on Windows, you use a program called WinSCP. And you use that like you use PuTTY. and WinSCP can connect to the system and copy your files. The other, if you are on Linux or Mac, you basically have to type something like this. So I'm just gonna give you an example. So scp command. Oops, I'm on bash, not on mumps. Here you go. So to do scp, you have to type essentially scp server and then colon file path and then something like destination on local machine. Oh, again, here we go again. Same problem. Okay, so now this is something I might have to walk you through the very first time that you do it. But I'll show you. For example, I'm on Linux, so what do I do in order to copy something? Let me give you a real example. Actually, no, Alice, that's not correct. That's not, I did not create the instances. However, when I copy routines from the Paideia environment to present them here, that's what I use, SCP. So let me give you a real example of SCP because I use it all the time. So here's a real example that I did last week. I copied Tom Heller's routine that's found in his P directory to a destination on my local machine. So you could see now it depends on how you log in, and this is where it gets complex. But you could this is generally the syntax that you use. The full syntax, which could get really long, is scp-p port number and then user at IP address colon file path, and then you could say destination on local machine. Now, you guys who work inside of the VA, now that I don't know how they give you access to the systems. When I worked in IHS, they always give us access to the systems via either Windows shares or FTP logins. So it all depends on how they set it up for you. But usually on the Linux world, you usually have a username, and this is how you would do it. Okay, so now that we covered an example of routine output, and we covered an example of routine input. Now we're going to go to global output and global input. So I'm trying to remember of a good global to export. Okay. Oh, really? Oh, because I'm on the wrong environment. Haha. On the empty mumps environment. Sudo su-v forum. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Now. Okay. So VISTA has an interesting global called upcaret holiday. It's one of the strangest globals that ever exists in VISTA because it pretty much It pretty much it just violates a lot of rules about globals, but that's not our concern today. Our only concern with holiday is that it's a perfect global to illustrate global export and global import. So that's what I'm gonna do with it. So what we're gonna do with holiday is we're gonna try to export it to a file, and then I'm gonna go to my GTM environment and then import it. So that should be pretty easy. So again, this is pretty easy. %geo holiday. Okay, this is important, guys. Cache does not read ZWR files. They're extremely easy to read if you write your own custom reader, but Cache by default does not read ZWR. So in order to make this work with cache, although we don't have a cache to test with, we're going to type go, and then it's going to ask you what the output device is. Again, we're going to do temp holiday, and we're going to put the extension .go. All right, that was easy. Let's actually take a look at the file. All right, so that's good. So let's go to my environment and do upgrade %gi. And it's gonna temp holiday.go. It's gonna ask you, okay, yes, you just hit enter, and now I have the holiday global. Wow, how simple. So that's it. It is very similar to kids, Jignesh. That's absolutely correct. And I'm gonna cover kids in a second right now. I'll be covering how do you do the same things with kids in a second right now. But this is below kids. This is if you just have a MUMPS system and you don't have VISTA installed. And so a lot of utilities like VPE, for example, are distributed just as routines. So Manoj just sent me an email this morning asking me. Uh, he downloaded VPE from hardhats.org and he wasn't able to install it. So let's actually do the same thing and see what the problem is. So I usually store my stuff in the temp directory because it gets deleted. So let's actually go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna go to hardhats.org and just copy. Oh no, that's not it. VPE enhancements. Nope, that's wrong URL as well. One of those is the right one. Oh, here we go. So if you go on the Hard Hats website, you eventually are going to get a file like this. So if you do wget this file, it goes and downloads it. And this is the URL on the internet where the file exists. So that's pretty easy. So let's go ahead and it's a zip file. We're going to go ahead and unzip it. So type unzip and the file. Okay. And if you're on Windows, what you would do is it's pretty simple. You would just double click on it and that will unzip it and then press on the extract button. So here are our files. Now let's see what happens when we try to import them. So do again, if we look, they actually have .mgr.prd. Actually, let's take a look at them first. These are actually routine extract formats. And you could see there's a README file. So let's actually take a look at the README file first. So here you go, the instructions for GTM system. So here it says load both VPE routines and VPE routines into your GTM environment. So that sounds like something we're gonna use %RI to do. So let's actually do it. Now, let me show you a new trick with RI. This is just a Linux trick. It might also work with cache on Linux, which is what the VA is moving to. You put a // and it means load it from the current directory. And so since I'm in the temp directory right now, it's going to try to load them from there. Let's see if it works. Output directory. Oops. I forgot to do that, didn't I? Right, $ZRO. Here we go. We need to make sure that we solve this problem. Let's see. Here we go again. And the output directory is this. And what am I missing? The trailing slash. Thank you, Linda. Okay. Restored 0 lines and 0 routines. What happened? Well, if you have been uh, if you have been living in the computer world for a while, you will know that Windows and Windows and VMS versus Unix, which is the rest of the world, they they have very different line endings. And what's happening here is that GTM does not like the line endings that we're supplying it. And that actually happens with every kids build you download from the VA. So essentially, if you get anything from the internet that somebody something that somebody made on cache, which cache always does Windows line endings, GTM always does Unix line endings, and so they're basically strangers in a strange world. So it drives us nuts for sure. But so what we do is we while we actually have a way in Vista to take care of it, the way we actually take care of it is we usually use a utility in Linux that's called DOS to Unix, and here it is. And if you're running Ubuntu or a later version of Debian, the utility's name is called from DOS. So this is important. It's either DOS to Unix or from DOS. And then we just apply it to this file and this file. Here you go. Okay. Let's say you don't have DOS to Unix available. There are several other ways to do it. I'm not going to cover them all right now. All you have to do is Google how to convert Unix line endings to DOS line endings. Excuse me, DOS line endings to Unix line endings. So again, this is we at least for right now. I proved my point that let's try to install VPE again. So %RI. Wrong. Although that would have worked too. Here you go. That worked. That wasn't too bad. So you're going to have this problem a lot when you're actually getting kids builds from if you're running GTM. You get kids builds from. You're welcome, Manoj. If you get them from the VA website or somebody sends them to you and they make it on cache, they just won't work directly on GTM. Now, by the way, the bottom of the routine %ZOSV for GTM also has a automatic converter. I'll leave that as an exercise for whoever is interested. Okay, so that was that. So what we're gonna cover now is we are going to cover uh, some of the issues about loading kids builds into the system. So we covered about we covered routine input, routine output. We covered global input, global output, and we covered the routine directory and global directory. Now let's talk about kids build very briefly and how to import them into the system. So I need an example kids build in order to do this, and I know I have a million ones on my system, so let me find one. Oh, here's a good one. This one Skip Ormsby did for me to install a routine editor that uses the FileMan editor. So guess what, guys? I'm typing an SCP command to copy it over to vForum. I'm gonna show you what the command looks like. Well, I'm not sure why it's not done yet, but it says it's presumably done. So anyway, the command that I typed looks like this. I told it secure copy this file to vforum :/temp/ which tells it copy it to the temp directory. So that's an easy way to just copy a kids build. And now I have a kids build that I could illustrate. Before I do anything though, I'm gonna use the file command. This is another trick I have up my bags to figure out what line endings it has. So when Skip sent this to me, it was probably, let's do Unix to DOS here. Oh, it's because I'm on a different user. That's okay. I'll do it over this way. Okay. Now if I type the file command, it will tell me it has CRLF line terminators, which means it's a DOS formatted file. So first thing I'm gonna do before doing anything, at least for GTM, is I'm going to do this. All right, and I'm gonna run the file command on it, and here we are. When it doesn't say the line endings, it means it's Unix. All right, so now before we load the file with, actually, let me show you how you load the file with kids, but I'm not gonna actually load it yet. All right. So if you've ever loaded the kids distribution, you're familiar with this menu. So you type installation and then you type load a distribution. You just follow 1 through 6. Or if you don't really care, and most of the time I don't, I just go from 1 to 6 directly. So this is where I'm going to talk a little about. So here's where it says enter host file. Normally, most of the time, you actually have to type the full path to the file, even on Windows and on even cache on Windows, cache on VMS, or GTM on any Unix. You usually have to type the full path. So the full path is something you're actually going to have to calculate every time, depending on the file. So let's just talk about. Let's actually do it this way first. So if I type pwd on Unix, it tells me my current path is /temp, and so ls dollar, I could use $pwd and then the file name, and that gives me the full path of the file. And if you don't want to do that, you just have to, write it down and concatenate it in your head and to figure out what does it actually look like. So okay, so that works. So we're gonna say no here because we don't want to load it. So now there are a couple of secrets to the trade though. Most of the time you have to type this whole path and it gets really ugly and really long and really annoying. So here are the secrets to the trade. In the kernel system parameter file, you only usually have one entry, so we're going to select the first entry here. And there's a field called either HFS or primary HFS. Let's see. Default HFS. HFS. What the hell did they call it now? It's not primary. This is an old. It used to be primary. I mean, right now it's primary HFS, but this is an older distribution. I'm trying to remember what is it? Default. Oh, default directory for HFS. Here you go. So, you can check in your system. You could do an inquire and figure out what the default directory for HFS is. And here it says it's TMP. That means that, here we go. I'm gonna change my directory to make sure that you have there are no tricks up my sleeve. So this means that when this is the temp directory here, that's actually the default. That whenever I do, where's the file name? Here it is. So whenever I do, I could just type the file name, and VISTA is gonna by default look in the kernel default directory, and therefore it's gonna load it right away. So a good trick when you're dealing with kids builds is to just place them in the default directory so that you could just load them right away. So that's one trick. The other trick to know with loading kids builds is, let me copy that kids build that over here. So now it's not in the default directory anymore, and let me just make sure I delete it so that it's gone. It's not in the temp directory anymore. So if I do this now, if I try to do it the old way, nope. Well, we could do this, but if I try to do it the old way, which is just putting the file name, it's gonna give you the message could not open file or HFS device. But notice that I invoked mumps from a directory. And in GTM, you know that using the intrinsic variable $Z directory, which here tells you what the current directory is. So if you have the kids file on the same directory that you invoked your mumps in, you actually have a little trick that you could do with kids now. Now remember I told you the dot slash means it's the current directory? So that's what we're going to use. Oops, nope. Where did it go? Here we go. So actually, I'm just going to go ahead and finish installing it. So I'm going to hit enter to do yes, and then I'm going to do 6 and install it. All right. And it's installed. So, anyways, that was interesting enough. So, um, I've had suggestions of what I could give you to do as an exercise, and I actually set this up on the Paideia environment, so you could actually do this as an exercise. So what I want you guys to do is actually do this on the Paideia environment, if you wish. So what we're gonna do is install the latest version of FileMan on this environment because it's not installed. So we're gonna figure out we're gonna actually do it right now. So let's write $Z directory again. Actually, we wanted to write ZRO. And if we go down into temp, the FileMan files are this one. Oh, it's not moving. This is the main FileMan file. And this is a routine I wrote that will actually just do the initial setup for FileMan for you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this. We're gonna write $0 so that we know where our destination routine is. And so we're gonna do %RI. Oh, one thing I did not do. Okay, this is bad me, but take it from me. I did convert. All of the files already have correct line endings, so we don't have to worry about that. So %RI. And we're going to put it here with a trailing slash. Done. We're going to do this again for FileMan. Okay, so the very first thing you have to do is you have to execute the routine that I wrote to do the initial setup for FileMan. Here we go. So this will just rename the date routines and the array copy routines, and then you can do dinit. Now we have FileMan 22.2. And we can now install the expanded language file, dmla init. That's going to install the entire language file. And here we go. That's it. that's pretty much installing all of FileMan. And guess what, guys? You could actually do that yourself on the Paideia environment. I using the exact same path that I gave to you, that I will have that I gave you here. You could do this on your Paideia environment. You could install FileMan yourself. So I'll be sending you the notes when we're done with this class, and if you wish, you could actually install FileMan yourself on your Paideia environment. Okay, Linda's typing a question. It's not a question. Okay. She says. Um, the Linda is actually not correct on one thing. That's not a kid's build. it's it's a build, but it's not a kid's build. I did work a lot today on writing that routine to do it to actually writing the routine to rename the routines so that it would be, yeah, you guys don't have to follow awkward instructions on how to do it. I'll just do it automatically for you. Okay, Alice is writing a question. All right, no problem. Thanks, Alice. So, okay, um, I am gonna say for now, this concludes our foray into Vista and MUMPS tools for today. And what we're gonna cover now is going to be dollar query and its friends. So let me just summarize what I did. So I'm gonna write the summary. So we've learned that percent RD and percent GD list routines and globals. We've learned that percent RO and percent GO export routines and globals. And we learned that percent RI and percent GI means import routines and globals. So we've also tackled a random number of other issues. So the random other issues we tackled were, we tackled the fact that using Linux paths properly in kids and percent RO and utilities. And we also covered the line ending problem between GTM and cache. So that's essentially what we covered as a summary. And but by the way, if you look at if you look in if you have any questions about percent RD, RO, RI, etc., you're gonna find these in the system manuals for GTM or cache, because they usually give you a good grasp on what does the thing do and what to type. Okay, so let's see. So the next thing I want to show you, let's talk about dollar query and its friends. So what are we? We're gonna use the titles global, which we used before for for doing an example of how we're gonna work with it. So here's the titles global, the whole thing. So what uh, what we're gonna do is I'm going to present you the easiest query utilities in MUMPS first, and then we're gonna talk about the actual dollar query, which is the hard one. So before we start talking about any of the dollar query utilities, it's important to have a distinction between two things. When I do this, right, up caret dic, open parent 3.1 comma 0, what this is, this is actually a name reference. Now, if I write in parentheses, in quotes, 3.1 comma 0, this is a string. And you may remember from last class about indirection that you can convert a string to a reference using an @ sign. So if you write at of what we just typed up here, that gives you the contents of the string. So this is understanding dollar query and everything that works with it actually is grounded on understanding the difference between these, because otherwise it will not make any sense. So we're going to start with something called $Q level. Or $QL. So let's write $QL of DIC 3.1 comma 0. All right. So $QL just tells us how many subscripts there are. But what's really important and really confusing for everybody is the fact that $QL expects a string as its argument. So let me try the thing that I just did, but I'm actually going to give it a variable name reference rather than a string. You see what happened? Okay, guys, I'm going to have to I honestly have to tell you, this is crazy shit. If I designed the MUMPS language, I would not do it this way, but this is how it is. This is just nuts. I didn't expect that it would do it this way, but that's how it does it. So you're just gonna have to live with that. You need to know that $QL operates on strings. It does not operate on variables. Okay, let's try $QL as a string. But this time we're going to start removing subscripts. So here you go. We're going to remove one subscript. We're going to remove the other subscript. And here you are. So $QL of an empty of something that does not have a subscript is going to tell you that has 0 subscripts.
It's interesting though, like even though when you're doing $QL on the non-string,
Yeah.
it actually gave you a bit of information though.
It
Maybe what the contents of that
so
string would be.
exactly. It evaluated the string. It evaluated the thing as it's a variable and got the string that the variable contains. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So Douglas was asking how come, why did it actually give us S when, let me move my cursor over here. Why did it actually tell us value is not a canonical name and then give us the contents of DIC 3.1 comma 0? And the answer is, whenever you use a variable, like when you do a write of up caret DIC 3.1 comma 0, it converts the variable name into a string, and that's what it's looking at. And it's operating on the string. Okay, so that's the dollar query level. That's it, we're done. That's all we have to know about it. The next one is dollar query subscript. If I could spell it correctly. Or dollar $QS for short. So dollar query subscript is basically it's like dollar query except that it's like dollar query combined with dollar piece. So let me show you. Okay, Manohar says not get dollar query. How about this? Can I explain it very simply? It tells you how many subscripts there are. Does that explain it in a nutshell? So here are 2 subscripts. Here there is 1, and here is 0. That's essentially what dollar query does. Query length. Okay, so back to query subscript. Back to query subscript. So write dollar query subscript of DIC comma 3.1 comma 0 comma, no, close the string, and then comma 2. We know it has 2 subscripts. So it's gonna tell you that the second subscript is 0. First subscript is 3.1. And what's the 0th subscript? Well, that's almost an interesting question. 0th subscript is actually the global name. All right, Linda has a question. Okay, so Linda has a very good question. Does the parameter have to be a global or can it be a local variable? The answer is it can be a local variable. Let me show you. So remember we had pumpkin arrays. So we had pump and we had 12 comma 1 whatever equal. So for example, you have this, all right? And let's say you're actually manipulating this node now. So you would want to you're manipulating this node. So you're gonna do let's find out how big it is. How many subscripts does it have? So write dollar query length of, in quotes. I do, yes. Thank you. Dollar in quotes this. And we actually we have 2 subscripts. That's correct. So that's good. So let's do write $QS of pumpkin 12, comma 1, comma, let's start with the second one. Second one is 1. First one is 12. And 0th one, pumpkin. Exactly. So that's essentially the same idea.
I mean, so there must be some way you're using these dollar queries on globals and variables that you actually don't know, because you don't need to know. You obviously already see how many such
I
variables.
do. I do.
So
So,
that's where you
okay.
have a complexity coming in.
All right. Yes. Douglas has a good question. Why the hell do we need this? I could see the damn things. Why do I need to actually do this? Okay, I'll tell you why. I was teaching you the easy things first because the hard thing comes next, and that's why we actually need this. Now, all right, I want to show you this, and we're back. We have this thing right now. So let's say I actually want to walk through the file description global, which is dic. Let me move my cursor. DIC 3.1 comma %D. So we could walk through it using dollar. We could walk through it using dollar order, but let's not do that. We are going to walk through it using dollar query. I'm going to show you how. So we're going to say set start equal to, all right, but I have a problem. I have two quotes inside of here, so I need to make sure that this is taken care of. Actually, no, let's not start with that use case. Let's start with a simpler use case. I'm backtracking a bit. So let's try the simplest case for dollar query. We have a global up here, and so we're going to take a look of how it works. So write dollar query. So, well, before I start another backtracking, I need to tell you what dollar query does. Gets the next global node in a tree. That's all it does. So if I write dollar query of okay. Okay, I'm gonna stop here so far. Does that make sense? Look at what you see above and what dollar query. So it gets you the next one in the tree. I'll give you another example. You could see up on your screen percent, possibly percent %D. And if we start with percent %D, here it is. You get the next one which is available, which is percent %D0. A simpler case. What's the next one? What's the next one after DIC 3.1? It's supposed to be, now DIC 3.1 is not defined by DIC 3.10 is the next one. So it should be DIC 3.10. Here you go. And as you can see when I moved my cursor, there's no 3.1 by itself. It's 3.10. Okay, so everybody clear on that. This is all that dollar query does. It does not seem confusing because I just wrote it down and it looks like it works like the way it's supposed to work. Okay, now here's the problem. Did you notice, guys, what was different when I invoked dollar query than when I invoked with dollar query subscript and query length? What was different? There's a small difference. The quotes, exactly. That's right. So dollar query does not accept a string. It accepts a name reference. Let me write that down. Okay. But here's the crazy thing. Okay, ready, guys? Dollar uh, dollar query's output is a string. Okay, you're gonna. Of course, you should ask me. Prove it. Okay. So we're gonna say, is this equal to this string? And the answer is yes. It is. Okay. So far so good. Okay, Linda is on track. I hope you guys are also on track. So far so good. That's what it's doing. So that's not bad. Okay, so where it gets confusing is when you do a for loop, because you when you're doing a for loop with a dollar query, you basically have to keep switching between string and name reference, string and name reference. And that's what makes dollar query really confusing, is that when you use it in a for loop, you keep fiddling with it forever until you get it right. So um, I'm gonna do a simple for loop. All right, guys, ready? So here we are. So the way I usually do it is I would say new ref set ref equal to. I actually want to print everything under DIC 3.1. So I'm just going to do it like this. As a string, not as a variable. And then I'm going to say for set ref equal dollar query of at ref. Quit if dollar query subscript of ref comma 1 is not equal to 3.1. Write ref, new line. I'm just making sure I type this correctly. And there's an extra space which I don't need. It's down here. Okay. Here we go. What do you think? It worked. In effect, it's as if I did a zwrite. I actually almost did a zwrite command, but I did it manually. Okay, so if you understand this line, I don't need to teach you anything anymore. but that's gonna take a while. So this is the hard line to understand. So I'm gonna go over it little bit by bit. So you'll understand where we started with. So so ref means a name reference, and I would tell it, okay, you're starting off with a string of this. Notice that I have to use a string when I do a for loop with $query. I'll tell you why in a moment. Now, let's jump over here. You see it's gonna mumps is gonna see a for loop and it's gonna do a set, and whenever any computer programming language does a set or an assignment statement, it executes the right hand side first. So $query, and we said that $query cannot accept a string, it has to accept a reference, and therefore I cannot send it a string which is ref by itself. I have to send it at ref, which is a name reference. So change this from a string to become a reference. But what's the output of $query? It's a name. It's actually a string. Excuse me, a string. That's right. Thank you, Lind. It's a string. So therefore, I could actually use query subscript on it because I have query subscript. Query subscript starts with it operates on a string, and so I could say if the first subscript of it is not 3.1, quit. And then I go ahead and write it, but I'm writing the string. Okay, I'm done. Let's go back to the beginning of the for loop. Now remember that ref, because this was DIC of 3.1, the next one after it is 3.1 comma 0. But ref is still a string. So it's going to execute the right hand of the argument, $query of at ref. And again, $query only accepts a name reference. So we have to put the at sign to convert the string to a reference. And it gives us back a string. Linda is asking a fabulous question. I'm salivating right now. That question is so good. Yes, I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, Linda. So, that's what $query does in essence. So let me show you a cute thing. Now we're gonna emulate zeroite. So we're gonna write ref, the equal sign, comma, at ref, the contents of the variable. As if I just did a zeroite. Except it's a bit weird with the quotes, and we're not gonna worry about the quotes here. We're gonna if we can actually work. The quotes is something that you add on a zeroite. So, believe it or not, guys, we've pretty much implemented zeroite in one line of MUMPS code. Okay, so yes, Douglas.
So ultimately, is this really doing anything you could just do with $order?
Okay, Douglas has an excellent question. Does $query do anything you couldn't do with $order? The answer is no. However, to accomplish the same thing with $order would take a lot more lines in mumps than you could do with just a single line in $query. Because $order, remember, only goes through one dimension. So Let me show you an example. So if you did dollar order, your if you did dollar order of DIC sub 3.1 comma empty string, you're gonna start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then percent, then percent D, then B. What if you use dollar order? What you have to do is you're gonna have to check. You're gonna have to try to do a dollar order under each node, and if it doesn't exist, ignore it, and if it exists, write it out. So it's sort of more complex logic. Okay. Oh, one more question. One more question. Good. Go ahead. Yes, I believe dollar query. Douglas is asking, was dollar query an add-on to MUMPS? I believe it was introduced in the 1990 standard. I'm not could be wrong. So I believe it has only existed since 1990. So you're not gonna find dollar query in very old FileMan code. That's pretty much written in the early 80s. Okay, so I need to come back to Linda's fantastic question, which is we have learned to convert a name reference to a string. So if we write a string to a name reference, sorry. So here's this is we're writing this is just a string, and if we put an @ sign, it becomes a variable or a reference. Okay, so Linda asked, can I do the opposite where I actually convert a name reference to a string? And the answer is there is, and I tend to use that in my programming a lot. And that is $name. So the way it works is if you write $name of DIC comma 3.1 comma 0, it will give you a string. Let's assert that they are the same. They are. So $name does the opposite of the @ sign on a string. Converts a variable named reference to a string. Now, just want to let you know a lot of the FileMan APIs or a lot of the kernel APIs expect you to pass a string uh, for your a string. Excuse me, expect you to pass a string for a variable name. So it's basically that's the place you would use $name in. So a quick example. For example, file upcaret die, you pass file die. Here you put the flags, and then here $name input array, comma $name error array. So another good example where we could use $name actually, which would be good. Sometimes we use temp upcaret $j as a variable, and so if we were to do that as a string, it would be hard for mumps to translate it. So if we If we write up caret temp of $J, it just looks like this. But if we write $name of temp of $J, which is subscript by job number, it actually resolves the reference. So that could be good when you need to pass this variable around down into other functions. Okay, guys. Uh, in summary, with all of that we covered here, I've covered some difficult topics, and I just want to let you know, um, I it's if you are confused about them, that is totally okay. And am I gonna try too hard to explain them to you and make sure that you understand them? No, not really, because I think, yeah, the more you use mumps, the more you will understand these concepts. But right now, it took me a long time personally to understand them because they were pretty hard. So my advice for you when you need to write mumps code that needs $query is that you essentially just get a terminal prompt like this and keep playing until you get it right, because that's the only way you're going to get it right. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Jignesh. All right, folks. That's it for today's class. And so next class is going to be um, I'm going to have hopefully gonna have some people who are ready with their homeworks. And what I'm gonna do is we're gonna actually walk through Vista routines, and in the process we're gonna discuss a lot of the Vista APIs that we see. So there will be I'm going to be probably giving you links on where the Vista APIs are located, and as we walk through Vista code, we eventually will figure out what's this doing, what's that doing, what's this API, what's that API. And after next class, I want you to think of what you want your project to be that you're going to do for this class. And you could pick from either one of the two projects that I outlined, either loading SNOMED codes, SNOMED equivalences into Vista, or doing the open info button URL construction. And or you could do your own project if you have one in mind. So just let me know, and we're gonna go ahead. And what I also plan to do is I'm plan to hold some office hours so that you could actually go ahead and we can go over a few of the APIs you need to use in order to do your work. So, for example, if you're loading the SNOMED stuff from if you're loading the SNOMED stuff, you probably need to show you how to read data from a file inside of Vista. So, all right, folks, that's it. So we'll see you all next week.